Welcome to The Machine, a podcast from Waterford Institute of Technology. My name is Rob O'Connor and I'm a lecturer in the Department of Computing at WIT. Today we're going to talk about some tech news. So we're not going to look at any one topic in depth. We're going to look at a few different news stories and we're going to get the opinions of some of our regulars on the podcast. We have Siobhan Drohan.
Hello, how are you?
And we have Brenda Mullally.
Hello.
Brenda has been on in a while, so you're very welcome back.
Thank you very much.
We're going to talk about three things. We're going to talk about one, which is about the international nature of tech, specifically to do with immigration and some policies that governments form. We're going to talk about Myspace and their data boo-boo in the last few weeks. And then finally, we'll talk a little bit about Google Stadia, which is a new gaming platform that Google announced this week. But the first one we'll discuss is there was a story in Recode. Recode is a tech blog that I read regularly. It's an excellent blog. It's an American blog, so it does have a US focus, but I suppose this is the tech industry and what can we expect? Anyway, they had a story about how US companies are moving tech jobs to Canada rather than deal with Trump's revised immigration policies. Basically, there is an issue now in getting H-1B visas, which is a skilled worker visa for companies and which is used an awful lot by tech companies, the large multinationals and also smaller companies in bringing in people who are programmers, security analysts, IT people, you know, just generally skilled workers. So I suppose we'll go to yourself, Siobhan, first and maybe get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, I read it and I thought the whole IT industry is a global world industry anyway. It's an industry where you can move around a lot. And immigration is definitely a huge thing, a huge part of it, in that a lot of your workforce comes from different countries. It's not just the country that you were in. Like when I was in industry, I worked with several different nationalities, worked in several different countries. And when I read the whole Canada thing, it was kind of, you can now see that Canada is an actual tech hub in itself. It's got a huge AI area.
Yeah.
So they have in Toronto alone, which would be one of their big centres, that there is a huge amount of immigration in there. All their tech people, the majority of them are actually immigrants and they're not Canadian natives. And when I was reading an article about it, there was definitely a brain drain happening on the native Canadian tech sector, where the people that were Canadian born were all going down to New York, Silicon Valley and so on. So there's definitely kind of their staff the Canadians are leaving Canada, and then there's immigration coming in to fill holes there as well. But then, you know, it's just basically a global movement of staff is pervasive everywhere, and its government policy affects where they're moving to.
Yeah. And it's okay. So when we talk about government policy, Brenda, do you have any thoughts on that before for a specific question?
I suppose fundamentally we can all be affected, whatever industry you're in, from government regulations, whether it's your own government or EU regulations. We've seen it with the GDPR more recently, and the rules that imposes on us, and so we have to change how we do things. Fundamentally, in this regard, it's to do with freedom of movement of people, and so. Obviously, in the US, immigration is at their forefront at the moment with their administration. But the other side of that also is the skills shortage. And so, that feeds the need for these skills. If they don't exist enough within the United States in this case, then they have to go elsewhere. And that's why the visas exist. But if they're hard to get, then companies will think of more ingenious ways of getting around that. Obviously, Canada being one of them.
So could you introduce the word there, skills shortage, or a phrase, I should say. Could you just describe what that is?
I suppose in the IT sector, there are many, many levels of skilled jobs. Computing is such a diverse domain that the skill set is very broad, from networks to programming, development to testing to quality and everything in between. And there aren't enough computer graduates coming out fast enough. And there aren't the longer years of experience, in sufficient quantities for companies to be able to employ. So there is a skills shortage within Ireland and within most countries, I would think, for IT positions. And so that feeds the need for these people. And certain countries, I suppose, are producing more graduates perhaps. And I know India and some of Asia would be those that would be producing a lot more computer graduates. And so therefore the need to source those skills requires visas for various different positions.
And this is a worldwide phenomenon.
Yes.
And that's the important thing, I think, is that, so we talk about multinational companies or a global marketplace. Okay. And again, I'm not trying to get political about this because I really don't know what I'm talking about. But if you're in a company and you have jobs that are fairly well paying jobs, highly skilled positions, and you don't have enough staff or you don't have a pool of talent that you can draw on from your local population, and that can be a country as large as the United States or a country smaller like Ireland or elsewhere, surely you have to look abroad.
Absolutely.
And I mean, that's just basic. I mean, there's nothing earth-shattering about that.
No, and because I suppose the nature of the computing industry, because we exist in this digital world where a lot of the work is done digitally online, you can have people that work together that are located in very diverse places. And so it naturally comes with the industry that we have multicultural, multiple languages, multiple sites where work is being conducted. And so movement of staff and accessibility to staff that are not directly local physically is the norm. I mean, in Waterford, the tech companies, if they have shortages, it doesn't mean that they have to necessarily get somebody within the local community. They can source somebody who will work remotely, or a lot of what goes on now is the promotion of an area. So whether it's the Southeast or whether it's Canada, the promotion of it as a positive place to go and work and live. And they sort of sell that whole package. And in that article about Canada, I noticed there was individuals who may have been offered a job in New York and also offered one in Canada, and they took the Canadian one for work-life balance and various other reasons, obviously. But that comes into it as well now in the movement of people in their jobs.
It's an interesting factor. You mentioned work-life balance because it is such. Maybe when you're 21 or 22, you don't really care about that. But
Not
when
so
you
much.
when you get old, when you're an old fart like me,
Yeah.
you start to be concerned about these things. And maybe that's why there's a shift in a lot of companies to move out of these cities that have issues around city life.
Yes, and I think
To go
tech
elsewhere.
companies are very forward-thinking. They're a bit innovative. They recognise, maybe because of the skills shortage, the importance of their staff, how valuable they are to keep a hold of, and to ensure that their work-life balance is good for them. And so there's many different flexibility options and support systems that they have in place in a lot of tech companies for the health and well-being of their employees.
Yeah, I mean, if you've been to any of the multinationals here in Ireland, and
Massages.
Listen, it's amazing. I mean, I
Pool tables.
took some students a couple of years ago up to a very large multinational. We were invited up for a day, and I mean, they were just the company were basically trying to almost poach potential workers early in their college career.
Absolutely.
But I mean, there was a gym, a pool, a food court where I think everything was like €1 or €2 or something, some nominal fee. And everywhere you went there were games consoles and pool tables, and it was almost like you didn't do any work. But of
Yeah.
course that's not true.
No.
You do an awful lot of work, but the idea is then you can also have your downtime, and you don't necessarily have to fit into a 9 to 5 clock in clock out kind of a vibe. Just interesting, Siobhan, you travelled a bit for work prior to your career as an academic.
Yeah.
And what kind of stuff would you have been getting up to?
So I would have been work-wise, okay, we'll talk about that.
Yeah.
So basically I would have first started working up in Dublin, but every company, bar one company that I worked for, was a multinational. So there was always options for moving around hugely. So one of the first companies that I worked for would have been CSC. They're a big computer sciences corporation, and they're a huge multinational company. They've NASA contracts, they've huge amounts of contracts all over the world. So they were big into Germany at the time as well. So we would have gone out there on site for a year, would have been basically you would have been, all your flights were free, your accommodation was free. We did great travel around. You were given expenses when you were out there, so you didn't touch your salary, and you would have been working on really nice projects out on site and had a great crack. We were young, we'd brilliant time, and they used to do things like you'd have a flight token. So if you didn't go home at the weekend, you could bring your mate out. So this was just brilliant. And then from there, we moved. I spent a year out in Germany, and I needed a break from living in Germany. My liver needed a break. So I came back and I moved to another company and started working there. And then they said, "We have a great site for you now, Siobhan. Do you know where you're going next? You're going to Germany." I said, "Brilliant." So I went to a different city, which was another thing in itself. So I was in Germany for about a year and a half working on various different projects. And just what struck me was how easy it was to move from Ireland over to another country, a country where I didn't speak German, didn't know any German at all. The project was an English-speaking project, even though it was mainly Germans. So it was just the language picked as being English. If there was, some of the meetings would have been held in German, and I would have had a translator in my ear just telling me what was being said. It was very interesting writing code in Germany because their variables and method names were German.
Oh, really?
Right. So even though you were writing normal code using an English-based language, all of the stuff was in German. All the screens would have been German, the user interfaces. So I know loads of words in German. I have no idea how to pronounce them, but I know what they mean. So motor insurance terms, I could tell you all about them. But and then I moved to, I would have been in London as well, in the city of London. So we'd have done a bit in there as well. And in Lloyd's, I was in Lloyd's for a while. You know, the underwriting place we used to be on the computers in there. Yeah. So our boardroom was actually, Sliding Doors, the film.
Oh, with Gwyneth Paltrow.
Gwyneth Paltrow,
years ago. Yes,
the room that she was fired from, that was our boardroom.
I can't say I remember it.
My claim to fame.
You were in a room that Gwyneth Paltrow was once also in.
Yeah, and she was fired from there in the film.
You really need to raise the bar.
I know, I'm quite famous. I should really put that on my bio for work, Yeah.
Brenda, did you have any international adventures career-wise?
Not to that extent, but when I worked with Honeywell locally in Waterford, the team that I worked on was all databases, and so most of our project work was European based.
Yeah.
There was some EMEA going a bit farther afield, but mostly all Europe. So we went to Belgium, Germany, and then a lot was based at home here. And then colleagues would have gone to Arizona quite a lot. Big plant out in Arizona, in Tempe. Yeah. There was a good lot. We were all divided into different teams. There was an SAP team and so on. SAP always went to America as well. But for Oracle, our work was mostly European based.
And what's interesting there is that there will be zero visa issues.
Yeah.
Nothing to do with, particularly with the European ones. And I'd imagine that going to America at the time would have been very, very easy. I had an interesting one in the last couple of weeks because I'm a course leader on a program. I often do a lot of admin work on courses, and every now and again I get a request from a graduate who is usually going to a country elsewhere. This is somebody who's maybe gone a couple of years, and they might need a transcript of their results, or they might need some sort of official documentation for an immigration one. And usually it's as simple as getting a transcript of their results, sending it out to them on the head of paper, blah, blah, blah. And it's a fairly simple exercise. But about 2 weeks ago, I received a request from a graduate from 2014, so 5 years ago. And this guy was a very, very good developer at the time, and he's gone on to have a very, very good career, and he's very, very highly regarded in the area that he does. But he's looking to get one of these H-1B visas to the States, and he's involved with a company and blah, blah, blah. And he's having difficulty. And they didn't just want a transcription of his results, they also needed detailed information on the modules.
Wow.
And I had never
That's mad.
so I've been a course leader about 10 years or something like that, and I've never come across anything like that.
So going into the real detail of the actual skills that he has that are not available within the States, obviously.
Yeah, but they didn't want the module titles themselves weren't enough, because I suppose a module title could be
Anything.
data structures,
Yeah.
discrete mathematics, networks,
Yes.
network operator
Yeah.
or something like that. So, but they wanted detailed information, and I had never encountered that before, and that's what maybe pricked up my eyes, pricked up my ears when I saw the article about Canada, because I had never heard of anyone traveling to the States in a tech capacity experiencing any sort of.
That's a huge amount of detail.
Imagine
I
Yeah.
sent them off hundreds of pages.
Imagine
I,
the
I got
administration.
modules.
Like, are they reading that as well? Do you know,
Yeah.
it's the amount of information that you get, and how many visa applications are they actually getting every single
the
month?
administration of that must
Yeah.
be huge.
Yeah.
So I wonder, is
Yeah.
there? I'm speculating, because obviously I don't know what American immigration policies are, but are they just looking to discourage people,
Like an insurance company.
Make it harder.
make it
Yeah,
harder,
yeah,
and therefore,
yeah.
if you really want it,
They'll-
you can come in.
yeah.
I don't know,
Yeah,
but
That
it's
was the
obviously
impression I got from those articles, that companies were finding it like that. It was a much slower process, was one. So it was delayed, and obviously costing more, and people weren't able to start work and so on. And so, yes, I would get the impression that it was a way in which, by not, they weren't saying no to any more to those visas, but they were delaying it.
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating, which just not something I've experienced before. And I had great adventures around the world after. I worked in England for a while not long after I graduated, because I'm from Waterford and I went to college in Waterford. So as soon as I graduated, I wanted to get out of Waterford, and I went to work in England for a while. I was in Cambridge working for a tech company there, and I had an absolute ball. It was great, really lovely time, and I really enjoyed myself there. And after that, then I was in Australia for a good while, and I worked. I went out as on a backpacker visa,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
most of the country has at this stage. But it was great. I had a job I had a very good job programming, contract programming.
Oh, you weren't a
With
backpacker.
proper
at
No,
all.
it was brilliant. It was amazing. So I worked
Yeah.
kind of during the week, and then at weekends I was off, and I was earning very, very good money with a very, very good company. Actually, multiple companies, because it was a strange contract situation where I had an umbrella company to work as a contractor, subcontracted to a very large multinational company who subcontracted me out to a financial institution.
Nice rates.
So somebody made loads of money, but it wasn't. Well, I made a fair bit of money. I was quite happy with it, but it was a strange situation. Anyway, but what was great about that was I was able to work for a few months and more or less not work then for another while, and then I just only had to pick up little bits of work here and there. It was quite interesting, but there was no issues with that. And I was going to stay. I nearly stayed in Australia, and they were offering me all sorts of visas and everything like that. Now this is more than 10 years ago. Gosh, it's been nearly 20 years ago. But there was no issue. It was almost like, here was the point system, and as soon as you
Yes,
said
that's
tech,
right, yeah.
your points were up.
I think it's still the case in a lot of countries that you can. I know of a graduate, he would have graduated maybe 8 years ago, and that's what he does. He does contract work for a certain number of months a year, and then he picks a country or a continent, and off he goes travelling.
Yeah.
Spends his money, comes back, does it all over again.
It's great. And there's another graduate I met recently, a guy who would have graduated from applied computing in maybe 4 years ago-ish, and he works as a developer, but he's a nomad developer. He works for a company who are actually based here in Waterford, but he travels. He just goes and says, I want to go off and live in Italy for a while. And he goes off and he does his work, and he just lives in Italy for a while. And he lived in Berlin for a while, and he just wanted to move around and see parts of the world. And he still had his job, and particularly travelling around Europe, there's no issue, because you can just rock
very
up, off you go.
straightforward,
And the nature of computing as well is that it doesn't matter what country you're working in. It's you're developing the exact same thing, regardless of whether you're sitting at home in Waterford, sitting in Toronto, or sitting anywhere else. You're still working on the same types of systems, bar the only things that I saw in my travels was just slightly different variable namings that were in different languages, and that was it. It's, the language, the international language is the programming language, not the spoken language. So you can travel so easy. It's not like other professions where you need to know the laws in the country. You need to know, kind of regulations around building. We can move really easy.
Maybe we should know more regulations. But
Yeah, we should
that's something
maybe
for another podcast.
GDPR in
another
your
day.
grand.
Right, let's move on to the next topic, which is the MySpace. I know
The what?
MySpace. Yes, MySpace, for anyone who isn't an old fart like me, is one of the first social networks that really caught traction. Anyway, MySpace were in the news this week because they had a data disaster, and they lost all of their pre-2016 user data after a server migration. Now, I don't know about you, but I MySpace, I would have a lot of nostalgia for MySpace, because back in the day I would have been on it quite a lot. Obviously I would have been much younger then, and I had time for social media. And what I loved about MySpace was it was great for music back in the day, and I would have been playing a lot of music back then, and we would have done a lot of stuff on MySpace. And this is pre-Facebook, pre all of that. Spotify, there was nothing like that, whereas you could go onto MySpace, and I used to get lost of a weekend night, Friday night, sitting down and just following links on MySpace, listening to music from all of these bands who I didn't have CDs of, which would have been more difficult to get back in those days. I know so that's MySpace, nostalgia for that. Data breach, here goes another one. And maybe just thinking about reflecting about how much of our data is online and what that affects. I don't know, Brenda,
I think this one is slightly different as well. Other than it being a possible data breach, it's a data loss.
Yeah.
Which is kind of new. We don't often hear of data just being lost, corrupted forever, no backup. We're very used to now always having a backup. It's always there. So that's a little bit different. And I suppose from a sense of history, a whole 6-8 year period of use of MySpace has just evaporated. All those songs, they're no longer accessible. Some from bands that no longer are together and they don't have CDs or whatever. Yeah. So from that perspective, from a sort of archive or historical perspective, it's a bit sad. But from a data breach, I suppose it's pretty big. In this case, you'd wonder, was it accidental? Was it more...
You're sceptical about it, are you?
I would be a bit sceptical, yeah. The cost of looking after all that data is quite significant.
I suppose there you go, because the first thing when I read this was MySpace. Is that even still a thing?
Yeah, why were they keeping
it?
it?
Still existed.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at Google Plus and Flickr over the last while, they have restricted the amount of Google Plus gone, but they gave lots of notice. You could take down your material and all the rest, so you had your own copy. Flickr, the free account, you can't have over 1,000 images, and if you did past March, I think, they would be deleted.
Flickr is gone now as well, isn't it? Or is it still around?
No, it's still around.
Oh, is it? Oh,
yeah. So, you'd wonder, one, why do they still keep it all for that length? Some people more recent, or in the last while, have been having trouble getting music, because originally they said it was a different time frame, or it was 2014 there was some sort of loss. There was a bit of, I don't know, ambiguity about what was lost and when it was lost. And so there is some scepticism about the background of the actual breach or the loss, the server corruption. But overall, another primary thing that I would think of is, yes, once your data is out there, you're giving it away for someone else to look after, to use, to manage, to take care of. And you don't always necessarily have the facility to get it back in some cases. And how much possession do we give away, to whom? If we think of all the services that we use, cloud-based, whether it's just for storage on Dropbox or Microsoft, OneDrive, Netflix, and so on. Yes, to be thoughtful about that, I guess.
I suppose the thing is there, MySpace, something that many people who would have used back in the day, or Bebo or anything, or now on any of the modern social network services that people use, the things that can seem flippant, and a small little thing like photos and or comments, and they can come back to bite you in years to come. Now, I'm not trying to be Johnny Alarmist and make everyone frightened of doing anything online, but it just made me think about, God, what have I done online over the years?
Absolutely,
yeah.
As I get older, we see recently, case of Declan Rice, the footballer, and some
Yeah.
silliness that he
Yeah.
posted online when he was 15.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I'm kind of glad that wasn't around when I was 15.
It
'cause all the
definitely hasn't
nonsense that I
affected
would've
us
got-
as much as the next generation. I mean, they
Yeah.
have to be very conscious, much more than we were in their teenage years, as to what they're putting online. And, you know, some of the teaching in it, they try and teach that age group. If you wouldn't print it and wear it on your T-shirt, why write it on, you know, think about what you're writing online or what you're doing online. If you wouldn't walk around with it openly on your T-shirt, or say it to somebody's face, whatever it is that's been discussed.
But
then,
that's a very well thought out and completely rational point of view, and it's a very mature point of view. But say that to a 14-year-old,
yeah,
you know, and it's like, off you go, granddad.
Yeah.
You know, I think it's just. I'm not trying to be alarmist, okay, but I don't know. It just makes me think. It makes me concerned about things. Although then again, maybe we're sitting here concerned because we've come from the it didn't exist to it's everywhere position. Perhaps in 20 years, nobody will care because everyone has stupid nonsense and silly things written online, so nobody cares anymore. I don't know. I know, Siobhan.
Perhaps, yeah.
Yeah, it is. It's something that does worry me about what sort of footprint is being created for all of these kids. And sometimes the parents are creating the footprint as well for the children without them giving consent.
Oh, by
And
having
that's
kids' pictures up.
yeah.
Like, wasn't there a case in Germany
Yeah.
there a couple of years ago where somebody sued for having baby photos up on Facebook? or
Yeah,
something
and
like
that's
that,
something that, like, it's, you know, kind of general little photos of grand and stuff. But some of the trails that I've seen of what parents are putting up around children, that's something that would concern me as well. So it's not only that the kids are putting stuff up as well, it's that the parents are being not negligent or whatever, it's a bad word to say, but they're putting up stuff that will in years to come could be quite embarrassing for the child, or, you know, I don't know.
But
It's a whole minefield.
Yeah, if you think now, at the moment, organisations use online as a means to not investigate, but to inquire about potential, let's say, interview subjects.
Yeah. So
You know,
this is
for
somebody, a
job-
CV
job
comes
interview.
in for a
Yeah.
job.
Yeah.
You see Brenda Mullally.
Yeah.
I'm going to Google her straight
Google,
away. Yeah.
LinkedIn, Facebook, you know, it's all going to be checked. Definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, you could probably guarantee
told
that
us they
any
do it, yeah.
recruitment agency and most medium to large size organisations do that without fail. And so, you know, if we fast forward another decade, you know,
Yeah.
what kind of analytics could you do on individuals, on the general data, not just within those sort of professional type data that you might have on LinkedIn and so on.
It also makes us think about, in this case, the stability of the services that we rely on.
Yes.
You know, an awful lot of people would use a Dropbox or a whatever, and I suppose we should be careful that, you know, Dropbox haven't had an issue. They did have a password issue a couple of years ago.
Yeah, but not a
you-
loss of
No,
data.
not a loss of data,
that
but
they
I mean,
couldn't recover certainly the significant amount. I mean, you can always manage to roll back to an older version a few days ago or a week ago. You could probably cope with. But imagine if, you know, right now Google Photos
Yes.
died and it was all gone.
there'd be a lot of people.
I might cry.
Well, this is it.
I spend my afternoon backing up stuff now. I'm all worried.
Yeah, I suppose it just makes us think, and again, about the nostalgia factor with technology, and I suppose where we might be in another 10 years. Just on a slightly unrelated but a side topic, did any of you see Captain Marvel?
Not yet. I want to go see
film,
it.
No,
this is
no.
a new Marvel
Yeah.
film about Captain Marvel, but it's set in the 1990s, and there's a lot of little tech jokes that old fellas like me were laughing
Nice.
at in the cinema. I was I had my daughters with me, and you know, they enjoyed the movie, they enjoyed the cat, and they enjoyed the silliness, and they enjoyed the music actually, which was great. But there were jokes about like Alta Vista and a CD-ROM loading, and you see the loading screen, and it's just taking forever, and you forget about these things.
Yeah.
You know,
Dial up.
you know, dial up, which we're still dealing with. And speaking about dial up, that leads us nicely on to Google Stadia. Google Stadia was announced this week, which is Google's new digital gaming platform that's cloud-based, and the idea is that games will be streamed rather than living locally on a console or PC. This type of stuff has been tried in the past with systems such as OnLive, but it's never really caught on because of a whole variety of network issues, bandwidth issues. It's a significant, it's a hard nut to crack.
Yeah.
Right. So gaming. Are either of you into gaming? I know, Brenda, you've mentioned before about your Nintendo that you used to love, the DS back in the day.
Yeah, we do. We have an Xbox which we never use, and we have. We've always had a PlayStation. So the PlayStation 3, and even just in the last couple of days, the kids play. I don't necessarily play games. My husband would have always played games right from when he was 16. And actually recently we did buy the Street Fighter a game for nostalgia, and it has all the arcade versions. It has all the different versions, and it's pretty cool. I do like playing that and kicking butts. But otherwise, it's mostly kids' games. And even yesterday they were really annoyed. We had to keep swapping the discs out depending on what game they needed to play.
Yeah.
Now we've downloaded, obviously, through PlayStation Online, we've downloaded some games, but those that you do buy on disc, if you want to swap, then you have to put the other disc in and so on, which is a little annoying. So this new platform certainly eliminates that side of things. But beyond that, I'm not much of a gamer. I thought in this one it was interesting that the connection with this one as well as with YouTube, where if you're watching YouTube and somebody playing a game, and there'll be a button to go to Stadia to go to play it. That's nice, because I know my kids, when they're allowed, watch YouTube. That's what they watch. People
watch games,
playing games. People that look like you, Rob, with a microphone and headphones on, and they're playing a game. And I'm looking at my kids going, "Why are you?" But anyway, that's a whole other discussion. And so I can imagine if there was a button, they would definitely go and play a game that they're looking at right now, because I often get asked, can I get this game? Can I get that game?
I'm thinking about the technical challenges of this.
Oh, yeah.
Because, as soon as I thought of it, this has been rumoured for quite some time, and they did a test last year or earlier this year, or last year, I can't remember when, with one of the Assassin's Creed games. And there are other services out there. Steam have Steam Link, and Valve have Steam Link, and Microsoft are due to release something very, very soon in a similar fashion. There's rumours about Nintendo and a whole bunch of other systems that are out there as well. But I'm just thinking about the amount of data that's transferred, because games are significant in their computation, the graphical information that's transmitted. But what's interesting about this, it's not just a download. So you could say, look at something like Netflix, and you're streaming video, and it's a large amount of data. It can be compressed, and you can do a lot of clever things with it, and Netflix do a very clever algorithms to manage that, so that if you're like me and you live in crap broadband land, which is Ireland's wonderful rollout of broadband to rural areas, it doesn't really exist, but Netflix works, whereas other streaming services don't work, which is, I think, is interesting. But with this Google Stadia, you wouldn't just have to download, you'd also have to manage the upload, because the information would have to get from the controller to Google's servers, cause some reaction, and then come back down again. And with gaming, timing is everything is about timing. So that a latency of a few milliseconds would seriously make a difference.
You get shot, depends on what game you're playing,
You would. I know, Siobhan, do you play games? Are you any interest in Google Stadia?
I don't really play games. I did play Minecraft there briefly, and I got a little bit addicted to it, so I stopped. There was no dinners being made or anything. It's kind of, I had to move away from that. But my kids and the husband as well are big into it. They have like PlayStation 1. They don't have a PlayStation 2, but they have the old PlayStation 1 from years ago. They have PlayStation 3 and 4. They've got the Wii. They have their Nintendo DS's. They've loads of different types of consoles, and they have phones. Well, not they just have our old phones with no SIM card in them, and they download using Wi-Fi all different types of games as well. So it is definitely something they're interested in, and something they have to be limited to. But it's I showed my 9-year-old the video of the launch of it, and I had to stop it a couple of times because he didn't know what some of the terms meant. So it's kind of explaining it to him what was going on. And at the end of it, he was like, "Oh, it's super futuristic." And he was getting really excited about being able to play with those YouTubers like Dan TDM. And at the end, he just said, "It's going to cost you a fortune, man."
I wonder, right? So we're all of a certain age, okay? And maybe we're not the target market for this.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I should be. I used to play games. I quite enjoyed playing games. I played games from when I was very small. Well, reasonably small, but like old 8-bit computers up to the present day. But I don't play too many games now purely as a function of time. I don't have time. Do play a little bit of Nintendo Switch, which I really enjoy. But I find that during the semesters when we're teaching, play very, very little. Playing a little bit with some of the kids now, particularly the Lego games. They're great fun. We got Lego Harry Potter recently, and it's mighty crack. We enjoy that. But I was thinking about, like, technically, right? So this runs at Linux. Google have an array of Linux servers that are going to be the cloud-based servers that run the game. So if you want to play Doom, which is one of the games they have made a big deal about having the new Doom game up on their server, that will actually run on a Linux server in the cloud. And then you will connect to that through what is almost a dumb terminal. Now, they're saying you can connect to anything with a screen. They're also saying there'll be the Chromecast Ultra, I think is what it's called, will allow you to play on the television, or you can do it to your PC or blah, 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 whatever. Anyway, you will connect to that. The game will actually be played somewhere on some server, somewhere where we don't know where it is. And all of that information will be streamed down almost as if it's video. And I was just thinking about it going, I'm skeptical.
I would be too.
I'm very skeptical because I know that games such as, if they were talking about older games and classic games, I wouldn't be as skeptical because I know they're nowhere near as process intensive and the graphics don't have that high fidelity. You're not worried about 60 frames per second or anything like that. So if they were talking about a classic game service, you could go, okay, totally see where that's coming from. But when you're talking about Doom or Assassin's Creed or any of those latest and greatest shooters, like I just don't see
very heavy on
and
data requirements.
I'd actually be more hopeful of Microsoft pulling it off purely because Microsoft, and I have no stake in the game. I don't work for Microsoft, nor do I work for Google, and I have no interest in it. I just thinking about it because Microsoft have a history with games. At least they've been in the gaming industry for quite some time, whereas Google haven't been.
Relatively new.
You know, and I'm thinking about, you mentioned, was it Google Plus there a while ago? Google, and Google have a litany of systems that they've started and then dropped after a
Google
couple of years.
Lively, Second Life version, isn't it?
Was that one? Yeah. I mean, I was thinking about there was Allo. Any of you remember Allo?
Vaguely.
It was another social platform with Google. Picasa, they've shuttered.
Right.
Google Buzz. Do you remember Google Buzz? There was another social network that they tried to
Google
start.
Latitude as well. Wasn't there something? Is that gone as well? Did they get rid of that?
Was that a maps thing?
It was a maps thing, and you could note it. You could look at your location and your friend's location. You could see where your friends were.
Oh,
things
I think
like
I remember something like that.
I remember using it once. We were at an open garden somewhere in the middle of nowhere, and a friend of mine was like, "Where are you?" And I said, "I actually don't know." And she said, "Turn on Latitude." So I did, and she found me.
Okay. Or there was Google Glass. Do you remember Google Glass a couple of years ago? And that was a big brouhaha about that, and that went nowhere.
They fizzle out quite quick, don't they? But you'd wonder how much investment they've put into this. I mean, they're saying 4K resolution.
Yeah, that's...
they're claiming a lot. Big things.
But
they're talking about the controller having direct connection. That you're not just reliant on the browser or whatever you're going through, or whether it's on the TV or PC.
But it's still going to have to make that round trip.
Yes,
And that's what I'm concerned about. Now, again, maybe I'm basing it on Irish broadband, particularly broadband in my case. But even then, even with, I just know
then
that...
how accessible is it if there is a very high bar that you have to reach in terms of your broadband connection? You know, how accessible is it to everyone? It won't be. And then there was a lot of questions about the cost of both sort of the controllers but also the cost of developing the games for it.
Well, no, I was reading a little bit about that because I'm interested in games development. I don't develop games, and I've worked on one in my life, but that was a different kettle of fish. But it's a Linux servers, and what's interesting about that is that Linux is not a traditional gaming platform. Games are available for Linux, and before anyone jumps down my throat and says, "Oh, we can play games on Linux," you can, but it's not. You know, the big titles. You know, Linux would not be one of their herald platforms. So it's not something that runs typically on Linux, but there is this Vulkan API. It's a graphics API. I know nothing about it, but seemingly that works very well with Unreal and Unity. It has direct compatibility with those, which would be a couple of the big gaming platforms or gaming engines. And I'm assuming other gaming engines like Frostbite and whatever might also be compatible with this in order for it to run. I know I'm skeptical, but I'd love to be proved wrong. It could be really cool.
But what struck me about when I was reading it as well was that it's when Netflix first came out, everyone was like, no, seriously, that's not going to work. We're never going to be able to download the stuff fast enough, and it's going to keep stopping. And this was when broadband wasn't great at the time. And now look at it like, do our young kids even know what a video shop is? You know, what Chartbusters, have they ever even seen a Chartbusters shop or an Extravision shop? So you're kind of going, maybe they're just about to break into the ability to be able to stream properly.
Yeah.
That they, you know.
But funnily enough, I was never skeptical about Netflix or YouTube or anything like that, because you could see exactly where it is, and buffering is not an issue. And even then, when it does happen, and it happens so regularly, it's not a big deal. It's just wait a couple of seconds.
But in gameplay, that's different, isn't it?
Yeah, that would ruin a game. It would be very.
You just get annoyed and you'd stop playing it.
Yeah. So we'll have to wait and see. Now, I know Microsoft do have an announcement coming with their cloud-based Xbox Cloud or whatever they're calling it. Steam, Valve are seemingly making another big announcement soon about... They did announce Steam Link is available anywhere now, and seemingly they have some other irons in the fire. So we just have to wait and see about that, and possibly some other systems might come online. But it is an interesting exploration of technology, because that's what I like about games, is that you've got programming and networking and art and music, and it's all badged up together and pushing the boundaries. You know, games do push the boundaries of what's possible, but maybe this is pushing a little bit too far. Who knows? We'll have to wait and see.
But it brought me back to, I used to work on mainframes years ago, and everything was a dumb terminal. So, and you'd literally, you would type in whatever you have, hit enter, and I used to be, say, in Ireland. The mainframe was in America. You used to go across that transatlantic cable and it would hit the mainframe and it would return back to you. And we had a really old kind of, it just reminded me of the latency that you're talking about. We were renting one of the transatlantic cables under the sea, and it would take about two seconds to come back to you. So you'd have to really think before you hit enter, right? So you're coding away and you're going, okay, now I'm ready to hit enter. Okay, so you'd hit enter anyway and it said come back to you. But then we leased another line and it was instantaneous. It was just phenomenal, the difference in the speed just by upgrading tiny cable. And that was kind of just brought me back to those days of where your heart would be broken, then it wouldn't be.
So I suppose latency, just to explain the term, is the time it takes to get from here to there.
Yeah.
And we live now, we teach an app development with some of our students. Siobhan and I share a module in app development, and this is 5 second rule. Like if it doesn't work within 5 seconds, you're gone.
Wrong,
I'd say it's down. I'd say it's less. Now. I'd say it's 3 seconds rule. It's nothing to do with
5 is quite long.
You know, we're very impatient.
The next generation, everything is immediate. When Siobhan was mentioning there about Netflix, my kids, I wonder sometimes, do they have any idea, one, what is live TV that exists only there in that moment and then is gone, and two, waiting for series. I mean, one of my daughters, she loves Riverdale, and the excitement on a Thursday when the next episode comes out is great. Whereas many of the other seasons, you know, you can just binge watch. And that whole anticipation of something and waiting for something, and it sort of puts more value on it. And I do wonder about that a little bit, whether this having everything immediately accessible benefits us really.
There's a lot to chew on there. Maybe we're all just old farts and out of touch, or maybe there's some. I'm going to go off and listen to my vinyl records and you know all that. Right. So Siobhan and Brenda, thank you very, very much for coming in and speaking on The Machine today. We are available on Twitter, Machine_podcast. There is a Facebook page that's just Machine Podcast that has about 3 posts. I really need to get on this, and definitely when the teaching semester is over, I will build a website for the podcast and we push on a bit further with that. We do have some interesting episodes coming up in the next while, so if you haven't subscribed and you're listening to this, please do subscribe to us on iTunes or Spotify or Anchor or wherever it is that you get your podcasts. And if you would like to leave us a comment or a review, that would be lovely, particularly 5-star review. We don't want any 1-star reviews, only a 5-star review. If you want to leave a 1-star review, go somewhere else. Okay, lads, thanks very much.
Thank you very much.